So good evening. My name is Don Kortz, academic dean here at Rockford Lutheran. Thanks for joining us tonight. And I also want to make sure I mention that Elizabeth Groves is joining us tonight also. She is our school's representative from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. ISAC is the state commission that's totally oriented towards everything having to do with getting kids into college. And they work with any kids, any school, any college, that sort of thing. She's a tremendous asset for us. We've worked with a number of ISAC reps before. She's new with us this year, but our ISAC reps are really got the background in handling things, particularly with financial aid and FAFSA and all those sorts of things. So she's here, and probably the most important thing for you to pick up tonight was her card. And they're at the square table back there. So be sure to grab that if you didn't, because they are literally a real godsend when it comes to getting the financial aid, FAFSA, and all sorts of things taken care of. So thanks for being here with us tonight, Elizabeth. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Holy Father, this is the beginning of a new beginning. And we thank you for being here with us. We thank you for getting us together. We thank you for the opportunity we have to share and learn and grow and be prepared for what is down the road for us. Lord, there's exciting opportunities, exciting moments, great joys to be celebrated, and great challenges to consider as well. Bless us tonight as we just seek to become informed and to begin to make plans for those sorts of opportunities that await us. Thank you, God, for these young people and the blessings that they are to each of us, our families, our school. And just bless our time together tonight, that it would be fruitful and provide an opportunity for us to go forward and see that these young people accomplish everything that you created them to do. In your name, amen. Okay, so tonight's program is really totally on the whole financial aid aspect of the college process. And it's oriented toward that, particularly right here at this point in time, because of the fact that the FAFSA opens October 1st, and you'll hear a lot about that if you're not familiar with it. We'll be talking about it quite a bit tonight, but that's a key component of the financial aid process, and so that's why we're here, and that's why we're pulling this off at this particular time. We're also going to have in a few weeks a senior college planning night, which is going to deal with all the other stuff outside of financial aid, dealing with getting applications in and dealing with resumes and recommendations and making choices and final visits and all those sorts of things. So that'll be coming up at the next program. Here we're dealing primarily just with the financial aid aspect. Obviously, we know we're here because there's tremendous value to what our students can do with the benefit of a college degree, and so that's why we want to be here to take all the measures that we can to see that that's something we're able to accomplish successfully at this point. These are some of the key things that we're going to be talking about: federal aid, state aid, aid from colleges, scholarships from all sorts of other sources. We're going to answer questions about what is aid, how do we get it, who can get it, how much can we get, how do we apply, what happens next, where do we get more info, all those sorts of things. First of all, I want to certainly encourage you to feel free to raise a hand, ask a question anytime as we're going through anything. And I've also invited Elizabeth to fill in any blanks that I leave in the process tonight too. So feel free to just jump in if something comes to mind, and we're here to get your questions answered. So financial aid. Obviously, it is money to pay for school, for college, et cetera, grants, scholarships, work study, and loans. Those are all very different types of aid. We're going to talk a lot about the first two because the fact that those are the most advantageous for us, because grants and scholarships you don't have to pay back. And so that's where we want to start our search process. Work study obviously is beneficial and crucial in many cases to provide some of the gap that we still have left after the scholarships and the grants. And loans are there as well, just to make sure we get over the top. But that's kind of a last resort because you have to pay those back. First of all, who can get federal student aid? So it's any U.S. or permanent resident, high school graduate, or some other kind of certificate program. A social security number is the only other thing required. And obviously, in order to maintain and keep the aid, you're going to have to make progress in terms of your college educational background. Typically, you also kind of make into the assumption that students are going to be full-time students. most financial aid is going to be requiring the students are full-time at the college level, which typically is about 12 semester hours. So a full-time load for colleges anywhere from 12 to about 18, can go higher than that, but that's really not a good idea for freshmen especially. But 12 is kind of the cutoff for being full-time. So that's a key for qualifying for aid. Other types of aid are going to be dependent upon the sources that it's coming from. There are a lot of private foundations. We're going to be talking about the Community Foundation here in Northern Illinois quite a bit, but they all have their own criteria. And so there's a lot of, well, it depends on type of answers that you'll hear in this kind of a situation, because it does depend on where the aid is coming from, what type of aid it is, and so on. So it kind of runs the gamut. So just getting down kind of the bare bones of it right off the bat here, how much federal student aid can I get? And we're starting to talk about federal student aid first, because that's kind of the beginning of the process, which is why we're going to be talking about FAFSA that you see here, free application for federal student aid. That's kind of the starting point for everything that happens relative to a financial package that you would receive from a college. And the real practical aspect of that is colleges obviously have funds to use to provide scholarships, and realize that colleges are oriented towards using their funds to try to bring in students to their school that they think are going to be a great fit for their school, that are going to be successful there, that are going to stay there for 4 years and graduate and go on and do great things and make their college look good. However, they also recognize that they've got limited funding for that. And so what they really want to do is make sure that you get all the federal money that you're due first before they have to start kicking in some of their scholarship funds. And so virtually every situation, the FAFSA is going to be the first step to this process, because they want to make sure that you've got everything turned in for FAFSA, so that the federal money comes to you first, and any other money comes to you first, and then the universities will kind of make up whatever they feel they need to do in order to get you to come to their school, depending on how interested they are in you coming there and that sort of thing. But that's why we start with the federal student aid in particular. Expected family contribution is another way of saying how much is your family expected to be able to contribute towards this process. And it's really irrespective of how much the college is going to cost. The amount of your family contribution is solely based on the information that we're going to talk about. It comes from the FAFSA. It's not relative to how much the school costs. And obviously then the cost of attendance is the factor that is the school issue. But the cost of attendance doesn't have anything to do with what you as a family are expected to contribute. That's based on just your family's financial situations. In particular, it's based on how much can the parents contribute from income, how much can the parents contribute from assets, how much can the students contribute from income, and students from assets. Now, those are all laid out with the expectation that you're going to be going to college for 4 years. So they don't expect you to sacrifice all your assets the first year, just because you have a lot of need in terms of the cost of your school and that sort of thing. Your estimated contribution from assets is going to be kind of prorated according to what year your student is in school. Now, other factors come into play with that as well. Recognizes that, in particular, if you have more than one student in college at a time, because that comes into play, and that has a pretty big impact on what your expected family contribution is going to be. And likewise, the students aren't expected to totally wipe out their savings account the first year of college either. It's proportional based on X percentage of whatever is in their account, what their assets are. So those are the key elements that are going to be used to determine what your family as a whole, both the parents and the students, are expected to contribute. And it's based on what they refer to as the prior year of college entrance. So since we're talking about students who are going to be entering in 2022, in the fall of 22, you're actually going to be using your 2020 tax return information to determine what your income is and to some degree your assets. Okay, so the reason for that is the idea behind having an October 1st application process for FAFSA is it makes a lot more sense if you're applying to college and we have an idea of what your scholarship eligibility is all at the same time. if you turn in your application for college, but we can't process your financial aid package for like 6 months, we know you're not going to be making decisions about college because you're going to need to wait and see what the financial aid package looks like. So October 1, FAFSA is able to be completed and filled out. It's all done online, but that's kind of like when they turn the switch on. So you fill out FAFSA. At the same time, your students should be in the process of applying to colleges. We've already talked about that with seniors. This is their job right now. They're done with their search process. They're into the process now of making applications. So they can apply to those schools. They can send their FAFSA results to those schools. Now the school can come back with an acceptance and a financial aid package at the same time. So now you can get into November, December, that sort of thing, and know with a pretty strong sense of certainty what college A is going to cost, and college B and college C, and so on. And we'll get into some of the details of how that works out as we get farther into this year. But in order for that to happen, they have to use your tax information that you've already filed. So the tax info that you needed to file by last April 15, or whatever they changed the date to this year, that's the information that you're going to use when you complete the FAFSA. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail later. One of the things I'll throw out here as we talk about assets is, so while your income is based on what was filed when you turned in your taxes last April, your assets are determined by whatever are your assets at the point in time in which you submit your FAFSA form. Now, assets obviously include things like a home and other investments and retirement plans and savings accounts and checking accounts and all those sorts of things. However, some of that is not expected to be used for college spending. So if I remember correctly, pensions and retirement plans and that sort of thing are not included as assets when it comes to FAFSA, because they're not expecting you to spend your retirement money to send your kid to college. Okay, so think of the assets as primarily being like just your money in the bank, your savings account, your checking accounts, other money market accounts, those sorts of things. So something you might want to keep in mind is, okay, when am I literally going to hit that submit button for completing the FAFSA? And if there's some things that you can do, maybe advance pay some bills, that sort of thing, so that your assets aren't quite so big when you hit that button, that could put you in a better position for more financial aid. Does that make sense? So think about that in terms of when you're literally submitting the FAFSA form. That sort of thing could make a difference. Now, there's also the expectation that you, based on age, are allowed to kind of have a certain amount of money in your checking and savings account, just as a part of living life. They don't expect that you're going to drain those accounts over the course of the 4 years, that sort of thing. And so it's not like you've got to run all the accounts down to zero in order for it to be helpful. But the point is that is a big part of what is considered your assets. If you've got a chance to kind of, like I said, pay some bills ahead, that sort of thing. Obviously, we're thinking of significant bills, and that could be helpful for you if that's not in the bank at the time when you click the submit button. Okay. Okay. So the amount of federal aid that you can get is going to be dependent upon the cost of attending the school minus the estimated family contribution, and that leaves the financial need. Now, the catch here is the federal government does not promise to meet 100% of your financial need. Okay, so that's where the issue comes into play in terms of, well, how much is my school going to cost? Because the EFC is going to be the same no matter what school you go to. But if you go to a really expensive school, then obviously your remaining financial need is going to be larger. The federal government's only going to meet a certain part of that. And we'll talk about what some of those numbers are as we go forward in terms of grants and scholarships and so on. Okay. So let's get into that detail. So the maximum amounts for the major programs for dependent freshmen And I think I forgot to change the state on here because I did change these numbers. So the Pell Grant, which is like the basic beginning baseline grant that you're eligible for based on your EFC, that's the maximum Pell Grant you can get, which is $64.95. So, you know, if your college is going to be $50,000 a year, that's going to be helpful, but it's not exactly going to, you know, get you there all on its own. And that's assuming that you have an estimated family contribution of this much. Now, realize there's a lot of things that impact that family contribution. Okay, so we're saying you're only going to be able to contribute $58.46, so you're going to qualify for this much of a Pell Grant. Your EFC is going to be heavily dependent upon, you know, how many people are in your family, what your income is, what your assets are, how many kids do you have in college at the time, all sorts of other factors. So you can have a pretty significant income, you know, well into the, you know, $70,000, $80,000 a year income, and have enough expenses and so on in your family situation that you'll end up with a pretty low family contribution. So don't look at this and think that, okay, well, why are we even thinking about this? Of course, I make more than $6,000 a year. Well, but there's a lot of numbers that go into determining what that EFC is. Okay. The federal work study program is more dependent upon what takes place at the college. They have funds and they have a lot of control over what happens in terms of work study. So that's why that's heavily dependent upon what your school has allocated or is willing to allocate to your student, that sort of thing. Federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans, you can get a total of that much per year. Now, subsidized federal loans mean that the loan does not accrue interest until after you graduate. So obviously that's an advantage to get a subsidized loan. The unsubsidized loans are also federal loans, typically fairly low interest rate, that sort of thing, but they do start accruing interest earlier. So there's a advantage to the subsidized loan instead. Basically then, there are possibilities for you as parents to get what's called a Direct Plus loan. And we do have some information back there on that, on the table back there. The Plus loan is basically you can borrow for as much as you need to, up to your total cost of attendance. You can qualify for as much as you need, but the downside is that is a loan that you as parents would be signing off on for whatever that remaining balance would be. Okay. Now, keep in mind, all we've talked about so far is the federal grant options. Okay, there's a lot more topics to talk about here. This is just the federal grant, but like I said before, the colleges are going to say you've got to apply to FAFSA first, because the colleges want to be able to see, oh, okay, this person's already qualified for, you know, $6,000 in Pell Grant money. That's $6,000 of our college foundation money we don't have to contribute because they're getting the $6,000 from the government. That's why they're wanting to make sure this happens first. Okay, so that's why we talk about the federal program first. Okay. Now there are some other federal programs available, and this says studentaid.gov here. And let me mention that we'll be posting the PowerPoint along with our recording here tonight on the school website under Counselor's Corner, so you have access to looking at this again. It'll be a PDF of the PowerPoint, and those are all live links. So if you want the version of it with the live links, if you want to just go ahead and mark that on the sign-in sheet over there, just say, you know, please send PowerPoint. I'll send you email you the live version of the PowerPoint, so you have all the live links. It'll make it a little bit easier for you as you're going through and working on some of these. But there are funds from other government programs that could have to do with people, whether or not their parents are veterans, and you know, all sorts of other potential eligibilities that are available out there too. Certainly encourage you to look at, and studentaid.gov is a place where you can go to look at that. There's information about that on the table as well. One of the things that you can do in terms of getting an idea ahead of time of how much student aid you can get is what they call the FAFSA forecaster. And so there's a link that you can use to go and find that under studentaid.gov again. You basically put in some basic general financial information. Again, it'd be essentially your tax information, and they'll give you an estimate of what you can expect to get from FAFSA if you want to know about that right now. So, okay. All right, questions on anything with FAFSA and federal stuff so far? There's some helps back here for actually filling out the FAFSA. Again, it's all online, but one of the things that I've got back there is the FAFSA on the web worksheet. And so if you want to grab one of these, it has basically all the questions that you're going to be asked. And if you want to take some time ahead of time and sit down and fill this out and pencil all this kind of stuff in, so that when you go online, you can just plug it in and go through the program, that would make life a lot easier for you. We'll get into some other shortcuts a little bit later too that'll be helpful for you down the line. How much does state school and private private scholarship money can I get? Well, it depends on the program, and there's a lot of opportunity research for you to do out there. Now, one of the programs that we can be thankful for is the Illinois MAP Grant Program, which is about $5,500 this year. Now, the MAP grant is limited to students that are going to school in the state of Illinois, going to college in the state of Illinois. So if you're not sure whether or not that's going to be the case, here's what you want to do. When you fill out the FAFSA, they're going to ask you, what schools do you want us to send the FAFSA information to? And they'll let you list, I think, 10. Okay, so you list those 10. Make sure one of those schools is an Illinois school. If you think you might maybe sort of possibly by a stretch go to an Illinois school, put one of them, doesn't matter which one, honestly. We can put Rockford College, Rockford University down for all of them. Mrs. Starwood. Yeah, she'd love that. But if you put an Illinois university down for that, you automatically get in line for a MAP grant. Okay. If you decide not to go to an Illinois school, it doesn't matter because you won't get the MAP grant, but it won't change anything else of what you've done. But it does get you in line for that in case that is something your student decides to do. The reason why it's important for you to do that is, depending upon what's going on in Springfield, which is always relatively unpredictable, the MAP funds do run out. There have been times when, they would open in October and they would be gone by Christmas. So this is one of the things I tell kids, okay, so this is why you don't wait until Christmas break to start applying to college and filling out your financial aid paperwork and that sort of thing. If you want to be at the front of the line when all the money is still available, then we do this in October. We do this October 1st so that we're at the front of the line. That gets you at the front of the line for the MAP grant and all sorts of other things that university might have available for you as well. So the timing is important, and the being on top of that and making sure you get the Illinois school on your FAFSA list is helpful. Let me throw out something else too. I know some people are applying to more than 10 schools. You just submit the FAFSA more than once. Okay, you put in your 10 schools, you fill out the whole form, you hit submit, and then you pull up the form again, change the 10 schools, hit submit again. Okay, if that's in your situation. Okay. Another thing that's going to be real key is going to be obviously the communication that you have with the colleges and universities. We've got some information that'll be coming up that shows that a big chunk of the money that comes to students, particularly going to private universities, comes from that university, their foundation, and so on. Okay, so you're gonna need to submit your FAFSA because they're going to want to see that before they talk to you about anything else. But there are definitely going to be some key people for you to talk to about how this whole process works. And you're going to want to keep in contact with them as you go through the process of gathering all the information, all the offers from all the schools that you're applying to. Because, we need to start from recognizing the fact that colleges and universities are looking for graduates. They're not looking for high school graduates, they're looking for college graduates. They want to bring in a freshman class that they can bank on graduating 4 years later that's going to make their school look good. Because one of the things that really is a black mark on any collegiate institution is if they've got too many kids that drop from freshman year to senior year. Okay, so that blows their ratings on US News and World Report and that kind of stuff. So they don't want that to happen. So they're looking for kids that they can be pretty sure are going to graduate 4 years later, are going to be academically successful. They're going to like their university. They're going to stay there. They're going to complete their degree, might even do a graduate degree before they leave, or they'll go out and do a graduate degree afterwards. In any case, that still makes that university look good. So that's what they're looking for in a student. So that's where they're going to invest their own hard-earned college foundation money. So this is where you as a student have a pretty significant role to play in selling yourself as that person that, yes, I am going to be academically successful at your school because look what I've done, you know, for my GPA, and look what classes I've taken, and look at what my test score is, if that matters to the school that you're going to, which let me mention that in many cases that doesn't matter to the school that you're going to in terms of application, possibly if they're test optional. In most cases, though, for those schools, their scholarship funding is not test optional. Most of them do require testing for that because that's a key indicator to them. Is this student going to graduate 4 years later? Okay, so just keep that in mind as you're going through this process. But that person at each of your colleges is going to be key to communicate with and to keep communicating with, because our students are pretty attractive for most universities. Okay, we've got a lot of universities that come here that like to talk to our kids because, you know, when you've got half your senior class that's already completed college level coursework before they graduate, that's a pretty good indication that they're going to be successful in college from there on out too. Okay, and for the last number of years, more than half our senior class has already completed dual credit before they leave high school. So they're interested in our kids. And so they're going to want to invest in our kids. And it's not like a college education is like buying a used car, but it sort of is, because there's nothing wrong with saying to school A, well, you know what, I'm really interested in your school, but school B is offering me this. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. So that's why you want to get to know those people at that college university, because it's their financial aid people that you need to talk to. Okay, questions on that? There are a lot of scholarship search opportunities out there for you. I've got a bunch of them back there on the table that you can take a look at. Here's obviously one that's going to be helpful as well. Okay. Okay, so how do we apply for this aid? Let's talk about the process of how it happens. We fill out the FAFSA for the federal money. The MAP grant is automatic if you list an Illinois school. The school aid, you're going to contact the offices that you're considering. And one of the things that is going to be helpful for you is there are a lot of other types of scholarships that are available. Okay, so we've talked about federal, state, school aid, other scholarships. This is where we get into things like the Northern Illinois Community Foundation. This is where we get into things like and I just got this past week, and so I made copies, the Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation. Okay, this is for 150 applicants will be named Coca-Cola Scholars and receive a $20,000 college scholarship. Now, it's 150 out of the whole country, but you know, we've had one before. Okay, and I can name other foundations, Buick Foundation, same kind of thing. You know, maybe 50, 100, 150 kids across the country to get one, but we've gotten them before. And one of the reasons is just what I was saying before. There's a lot of reasons why schools like our kids. And the same thing with those foundations. These scholarship foundations obviously do not want to invest money in someone that they don't think is going to finish school. And so if you've gone to a good school, you've taken good classes, you've gotten good grades, you got a good test score, those are the people that they're looking for, and that's who they're willing to invest in. So I get all sorts of these types of things like this one from Coca-Cola, and like I mentioned, Buick, and there's hundreds of foundations like that out there. I don't have a means of distributing that information very well, except through our Rockford Lutheran Guidance Office Facebook page. Okay, so I'm just starting to get that stuff now for this season, so it's starting to go up there now. But what you can do, if you'd like, go and find and like the Rockford Lutheran Guidance Office Facebook page, and you can scroll back through last year and take a look at some of the different organizations and agencies that sent me information like this in the past year, and it's quite likely they're going to do it again. So you can anticipate that stuff coming up again, and you can even maybe contact some of them now, because obviously their emails and websites probably haven't changed. So you can start kind of getting a feel for what's out there and who's it for. Different scholarship agencies are going to be looking for different types of people that they want to contribute to. Some of them are going to be specifically for a particular type of career. Some of them are going to be specifically for students of a particular ethnic background. Some of them are going to be interested in students that are coming from, you know, a particular region of the country, et cetera. I mean, there's all sorts of criteria for that. And the same sort of thing is true when we talk about the Northern Illinois Community Foundation. Okay. Now, the difference with this organization is the fact that those scholarships, and there's paperwork back there at the table on that too, they're only for people here in like the Boone, Winnebago, Ogle County area. So you're not competing against hundreds of thousands of students nationwide. You're just competing with the kids that are graduating from high school this year in this region. And so every year we've got a number of kids that get scholarships from the Community Foundation. They've got a really long, elaborate application process, but the reason for that is you fill in one application and you automatically get applied to all of the possible scholarships that are available to you. So it's going to ask you if you're a female golfer, because they've got a scholarship that's just for female golfers. They're going to ask you if you're from Durand, because there's a scholarship for only people that are from Durand, et cetera. Okay, so, but that's where you can look to get some of that kind of information. Okay. One of the things that we should talk about when we're talking about applying for the federal student aid is you need a FAFSA ID. Okay, so we're talking about the nuts and bolts of how we go through the process. And this tells you how to get to FAFSA.gov, and there's literally a box there that says start here, and that'll take you to where you get your FAFSA ID. The student needs one and the parent needs one. Okay, you need that ahead of time. That's something that you can do ahead of time and so on, so it's ready to go when October 1 comes and you have to get going. So gather the documents that you need. Again, there's a checklist here that we talked about. There's a FAFSA on the web worksheet that you can get online, or you can get the paper version that I already put out there. You fill out the FAFSA on or near October 1st as much as possible. If you need help, there's some places you can go to get help. When you do submit it, you're going to want to make sure you get the confirmation that says that it's been submitted, and then you need to log out, so make sure you get that. You should also be getting an email to the email address that you put into the FAFSA that says, you know, this is confirmed submission and that sort of thing. Now, the other thing that's going to be really helpful is this: when you need help, this is where Elizabeth comes in, because I mean she's handy in terms of, you know, call her on the phone and email her and whatever, and she'll help you with line 23 or whatever it is that you're stuck with, because she knows what to do there. So don't be afraid to take advantage of that. Now, one other tip that I'll put in there: the IRS data retrieval tool automatically import all your tax information into FAFSA. Highly recommend that you do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's going to save you an awful lot of headache in terms of finding your tax papers and figuring all that stuff out, and, you know, understanding what box is this off my 1040 that goes in this box on the FAFSA. It does all that for you. So just let it do it. The other advantage to this is there are situations in which they kind of go through and they ask for confirmation of your information that you put on FAFSA. In other words, if you don't use the data retrieval tool, it's much more likely that your FAFSA will get checked or audited, and you'll have to send in tons of paperwork and so on, basically your tax paperwork. So you can just avoid that by using the data retrieval tool. Then FAFSA knows that they've directly talked to IRS and everything's come straight to them, and so then there's no question about that kind of stuff. So that's a good way to go with that. Then number 4, watch for response in the email that I just mentioned. Check to make sure your information is correct. If you have any incorrect information, you just go back in the FAFSA and fix it and then resubmit it. That's not an issue. Watch for emails, and that's when you should be getting letters from schools saying, yes, we got your FAFSA, and based on what you sent us, this is what kind of a package we can give you, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And like I said, then schools will start sending you the information, and then once you decide where you want to attend, then again, you'll be in communication with their financial aid office in terms of when's the bill due, how much do I owe, when do you need a deposit, and all of those sorts of things. One of the things that sometimes people wonder about is, okay, so will if I put on here that I'm applying to this school, but I'm also applying to that school, could that potentially change what that school wants to offer me when they're coming down to giving me their money from their institution? They don't know who else you put on your list of 10, so don't worry about that. A couple other details here we'll throw out too. In divorced or separated families, the parent the student lived with the most during the prior 12 months is the FAFSA parent. That's the parent that needs to send their tax forms. That's the parents whose assets need to be confirmed and all that sort of thing. And if the FAFSA parent remarries, the step parent's income and assets are included in the FAFSA process as well. Okay. And this means literally, if we have to count the days in which you were at this house or you were at this house, that's how that works. Okay. Home and retirement assets are not counted in FAFSA. I mentioned it before about the cash assets are based on the date that you hit the submit button. If the older parent is 45 or more, then that much in savings and assets are protected, and that number gets higher as you get older. I didn't update that number this year, so it might be a little bit different, but I'm guessing probably not much. Another thing I'll throw out there is we talked about the Direct Plus loan that parents are eligible for. Depending upon what your credit rating is like, that might not be the best deal. So don't be afraid to shop around. I mean, there's other institutions that, if you've got a really good credit rating, are quite likely willing to give you a college loan for a better interest rate than that. So don't be afraid to shop around. University of review of special circumstances. Okay, sometimes there are circumstances that come up that maybe something in your family's situation has changed since you did your prior year tax paperwork, and now, which could be, unemployment, loss of job, COVID related, et cetera, or, heaven forbid, a death in the family, that sort of thing. So there are opportunities for you to go through and adjust those sorts of things. Every university has got somebody in their financial aid office who can help you go through and review those special circumstances. They can kind of, for example, see FAFSA from the other side, like the side that the university sees and that the federal government sees and so on. And so there can be something that they can help you with. If you've got a special circumstance, you got a situation that's changed, they can help you. They can sort of go into your FAFSA and fix that for you, which then would change all your numbers and maybe improve your situation in terms of scholarship money that you'd be eligible for. Okay, so if you've got something like that has happened or does happen, then be sure to be in contact with, again, that's probably a situation Elizabeth could help you with as well, but certainly be in contact with those university people who are eligible to review FAFSA stuff and so on. I threw in a bunch of questions here and scenarios just to kind of give you an idea of what's the rules are. Here again, we said that for a divorce situation, it's the person that they lived with the most. If it's equal, then whoever provided more financial support during the last 12 months would complete the FAFSA. Here we've got some things that come into play as we talk about legally adopted students versus someone else who is maybe just a legal guardian. And in that situation, the answer is different. So a lot of complicated factors that come into these sorts of situations. Again, that's the kind of stuff that Elizabeth can help with. But there's a lot of yeah, a lot of complexity in our world today, and it shows up here certainly. Social Security, disability, and that sort of thing. Give you some information about how that's handled. Again, this is going to be available for you to see. This is kind of a step of how we go through the process of who decides who fills out and whose money is included in the FAFSA determination and so on. And just threw in some just some pointers here for you. I'm trying to keep our time moving along here so we don't get going too late. Again, this will be available for you to see online if you're interested in looking at more of the details. Want to make sure we talk about merit aid. This is where we get into things like the community foundation. Merit aid refers to anything that's based on, you know, your students in terms of athletic eligibility or academic eligibility or fine arts capabilities. All those sorts of things are totally, you know, fair game for scholarship opportunities. And, you know, sometimes there's situations where kids don't apply for something that they could have been eligible for. You know, I talked to a lot of kids about the fact that, you know, there's a lot of universities that are struggling to find good musicians, but they really want some good musicians because they want to take their orchestra, band, choir, whatever around the country and say, wow, look what a great university you have. Don't you want to come here too? But they can't do that if they don't have good musicians. And so, you know, they're paying for musicians. And so, you know, practice that horn and don't be afraid to audition. But all sorts of other types of merit aid that are available there for you too. So make sure you check and see when the athletic and audition timeframes are and that sort of thing, if that's something that that's part of your situation. Here I threw in some scenarios as well, just to give you an idea about how the expected family contribution changes, what that means in terms of, you know, how that was determined, what the assets are, what some other scholarships can look like, and what the bottom line cost is going to be for students. And unfortunately, part of our screen is blocked out here at the bottom. But the idea is, you know, you can have some families with some pretty significant income that are still going to qualify for some fairly significant assistance with college. So, you know, don't be afraid to continue to look into that, depending upon, you know, regardless of what your family situation is. A supplemental opportunity grant is for people that are in a more severe, significant need-based situation. Perkins loan would be one of those subsidized loans we're talking about, and Stafford loan as well. Perkins loan for, again, for more high need situations. But you can see, you know, you can have a family income that's fairly high, but your EFC can still be exceptionally low for all sorts of reasons. Okay. And there's other things that come into play in terms of student activities that are you know, part of some schools' financial aid packages as well. And here you've got a much lower family income, but a higher family expected contribution, and so on. All sorts of other reasons for that. So questions on anything we've covered so far? Okay, this diagram is basically just to show you, as I was talking, this is from Augustana. I just use this because they have some nice pictures and it hasn't really changed that much in the last few years. But you see, this is how much of the grant that a typical Augustana student would get that comes from Augustana. Okay, so that's why I said, and this is where we get into that issue as well, where, you know, don't walk into this whole college situation assuming that because I spent, you know, lots of money sending my kid to a private high school, I can't afford to send them to a private university. Absolutely not true. There are a lot of our students that end up going to private universities for far less than they would pay to go to a state school because of this chunk of the pie right here, because Augustana or whoever, fill in the blank, really wants your student. So there's all sorts of ways to make that happen. So don't count that out at all as you're taking a look at your student's potential situation. Some other things to keep in mind as we're taking a look at maybe some private and public school comparisons. The data says, and this came from the College Board, and I forget the acronym for that. I can't read it now, but 79% of the students at college in a private school finished in 4 years, and 49% in a public school did. Well, okay, it's going to cost you an awful lot for that extra year of school. So that private school might not be all that much more expensive when you only have to pay 4 years versus 5 years at public school. So those are some things you want to keep in mind too as you're talking about this. There was a study that was done, and there's a link to it on the Counselor's Corner, that compared Lutheran universities with flagship state universities. Now it was funded by a Lutheran organization, so that's why they surveyed Lutheran universities. But I want you to think of it in terms of, okay, what's the difference between a public university and a private university? Because many of these same characteristics applied just as much to Rockford University as they do Augustana or Carthage or Concordia, et cetera. Because there are other these types of factors that are every bit as much of a Rockford University education as they would be a Bradley and so on. So think about these sorts of issues as you're making comparisons for your college planning. Again, I'm putting this out there to emphasize a couple of things. As I said before, don't assume that private universities are going to be out of the picture for you in terms of cost, because that's absolutely not true. The other thing that I would say is, think about the fact as well. When I was taking my kids to visit a number of schools back in the day, one of the university presidents that met with us as incoming parents said, consider the culture of the university to which your student plans to attend. Consider the culture of that university, because they're going to be living here for 4 years. The culture of that school will change them. What do you want your student to look like 4 years later? That should drive your decisions that you're making about the school that they attend, about the decisions that you make about where you can afford to send your student, and so on. Because the amount of time that they're going to be there during some very formative years will change them. What do you want your student to look like 4 years later? And I encourage you to think about that, particularly because there are reasons why you chose to send your student to Rockford Lutheran. And, we've got a very distinct culture. Every university has a very distinct culture. That's why I encourage students, make sure you go and visit the schools that are at the top of your list, because you don't understand that school until you visit there and experience their culture firsthand. And every university is different. So think about that in terms of the types of things that are important to you and to your family and to your student, and what you want this 4 year or 5 or 6 year experience, depending on if they're talking grad degrees and that kind of thing. What do you want that experience to look like for them? So give that some serious thought. Throwing out some other things here to keep in mind as we're talking about college funding. A private college 529 plan is something that's going to be a little bit late if all you have is a senior. But if you've got some other kids down the road, there are some advantages to it. You lock in some prices, you get some tax breaks and those sorts of things. So consider that as a possibility. If your university comes back to you and says something to you about the CSS financial aid profile, it's kind of a private, high-end version of FAFSA. Okay, it asks a lot more questions. It's typically used by more selective elite universities. But if you hear the term, now you know what it means. Some other things that you want to make sure your tax advisor is aware of relative to your situation. If you haven't had a kid in college before, there are some tax credit advantages that you want to be sure that you take advantage of. If you're paying out money for your kid to go to school, there are some ways in which you can recoup some of that through your taxes. So be sure that your tax advisor is aware of those sorts of things. These are all sorts of places that you can get more information. Like I said, there's a lot of them posted on the pages that are there in the back of the room. There's a lot of others that are listed on Counselor's Corner. There's a whole page of stuff on Counselor's Corner in terms of scholarship information, that kind of thing. So let's let Elizabeth come up and fill in some spaces and answer some questions that she can handle. So thank you.
You can call me Beth. So one thing I just want to say about math, it's something that's based, so the state agency is, one of our big grants is yes, you have to go to an Illinois school, but you do have to demonstrate that financial need as well. Thank you. So I just want to point that out. A couple of things with the loans, and I think this was also listed a little bit later, but the subsidized loans, those are going to be need-based as well, and then the unsubsidized is going to be not need-based. So just something to note there. What else did I want to mention? I think federal work study you talked a little bit about. For federal work study, I do recommend, so FAFSA is going to be the first step for that, for lots of these things actually, but I do recommend, there's a question on the FAFSA. It's going to ask you if you want to be considered for federal work study. Even if you don't know, I would still recommend saying yes. It's not committing you to anything. It's just saying I'm interested if I meet those qualifications. That's also something that's going to be need-based as well. But the three options there are yes, no, or don't know. If you put don't know, they're likely not going to even consider you for it. That's just kind of something that to know on the back end of things, so that you're not caught off guard with that. Federal work study is campus-based, so you do have to get a job on campus. You have to, just because you're given federal work study by the government doesn't mean you automatically have that job. You do have to go ahead and apply for a job, see what jobs are available on your campus for federal work study. That's a pretty big misconception. A lot of people think, well, I got federal work study, so I must have a job right away, right? So not the case. You do have to apply for a job and get that job as well. The nice thing though about federal work study is it's going to pay the federal minimum wage. So I did not have federal work study as a student. I worked a campus job, and let me tell you, it did not pay very well. It was like $7 or $8 an hour. It was not good at all. You will get the federal minimum wage if you do federal work study. So that's a nice perk. It does come in the form of a paycheck though, so you do have to kind of continually be earning that. Requires a little bit more responsibility, but it's nice to get that continually throughout your years that you're doing federal work study. And then that money that you earn doesn't get reported on the FAFSA the next year. So that's also nice, because other jobs that you are doing for campus or over the summer or whatever you're doing, that will get reported for the student's income, but the federal work study does not. So super nice perk there as well. Trying to think if I wanted to say anything else. I do want to just kind of talk a little bit about what ISAC does. So ISAC is the state agency that administers financial aid. So we administer MAP, things like that. We have other scholarships and loan repayment programs. What I do as a core member, there's about 100 or so of us throughout the state. So we work in high schools, and I work with around 11 in the area. And we, give financial aid process presentations. We do FAFSA workshops. We work one-on-one with students to, we do everything from financial aid to just anything in the college going process, and kind of getting students prepared for that. So it's super fun. I love working with these students. I've loved working with the students that I've been with this year. And it's been a welcome change from last year to actually be in person, because ISAC was completely virtual last year. So looking forward to talking to you all a little bit more. One other thing I just want to say is I went to a private school. He was talking a little bit about how private schools can be a little bit cheaper than public depending on your scholarships that you get. So just so that you have an actual physical case study in front of you, I went to a private school. Going to public school was probably going to be more expensive for me. My parents' expected family contribution was pretty high, so I wasn't getting any of that Pell money or MAP money. I wasn't getting any of the subsidized loans. So going to a public school, I wasn't going to get that merit scholarship because I had a lot more competition. The private school I went to had, they took an interest in me. My test scores were good. My grades were good. They gave me half of my cost of attendance in scholarship that I didn't have to pay back. And my parents were able to cover the rest. So I graduated debt-free, and that was not going to be possible at a public university. So just so you are kind of aware, because I know that sticker price is a little bit shocking on private universities. So just so you can actually see a real life case study that is possible. Don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Thank you. Along that line, actually, one of the things I want to talk about, and we talk with kids about Grand Canyon University at times. It's one of the schools that comes out and visits us and so on. But They've got a really unique program that kind of dovetails with what Elizabeth's talking about here. So it's in Arizona, Phoenix. It's a good sized D1, 25,000 student Christian university. And they're really specific, they're really deliberate about maintaining that Christian culture. And so they have a special program that is arranged with Christian high schools all around the country. That's part of their consortium, and we're part of that consortium. We don't, as a school, get anything back for it, but you can as a student. If you're here all 4 years of high school and you go to Grand Canyon University, that automatically qualifies you for $4,000 a year scholarship just because you went to Rockford Lutheran. Now, keep in mind, Grand Canyon University actually makes most of their money on their online program. And so their tuition is pretty low to begin with. Now, this is a old paperwork. It's only a couple years old, but at that point in time, tuition, room and board, and everything was going to be under $25,000 a year. ISU is more than $25,000 a year. Okay, you take $4,000 a year off of that just because you went to Rockford Lutheran. If you got a GPA of 3.5 or more, you can get anywhere from another $5,500 to another $10,000 a year off for that. We've had kids that have gone to GCU for less than they paid to go to Rockford Lutheran. So yeah, reiterate, it is possible. Don't assume that the private schools aren't going to be an option for you. Don't assume they're going to be more expensive. Really look for the school that's going to be the best fit for you and your family, and understand the culture of that school and what that school's about. Obviously, it needs to fit what your students' career interests are and that sort of thing. And that's one thing that's kind of cool about GCU, a school of 25,000. They've got a lot of really solid programs. So see me about that if you have any questions. So any other questions that popped up as we ran through this? Sorry, it was kind of quick and buzzing through things there, but the information will be available to you later. So thanks again for being here. Obviously, you know where to find me. Make sure you picked up one of Elizabeth's cards so that you can get in touch with her, because she's going to be a tremendous asset to you. And God's blessings to you on the important decisions that are coming up. Just don't assume there's any doors that are closed. Just go after that dream. We'll talk about some more of that aspect of the college application process and so on when we get together again in a couple weeks. Okay. Thanks so much for being here. Have a good evening.